and welcome to the this meeting of the Charity Trustees Subcommittee. The meeting today is open to the public. There are no items that contain exempt information. We have received one agenda-related question from the member of the public. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other equipment are switched to silent modes as to not disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire practice planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the town hall staff. The assembly point is to the square. And for the benefit of the webcast, please can each of the Charity Trustee Subcommittee members introduce themselves. I am Richard Williams. I'm a member for Stannington Ward and I chair this subcommittee.
Fran Belbin, Councillor for Firth Park Ward and Deputy Chair of the committee.
Tony Downing, Councillor from Osbury Ward and substitute for Mike Chaplin. Thank you.
I'm Christine Gilligan. I'm a Councillor for Hillsborough Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Curtis Crossland. I am member for Bayton Ward and also the Chair of the Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee.
Thank you very much. And when I ask officers to introduce themselves as and when they come to speak. Thank you. Item 1 is apologies for absence. It's a rhetorical question. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, we've got apologies from Councillor Mike Chaplin and Councillor Tony Downing is substituting.
Thank you. Item 2 is exclusion of the press and public. As I've just said, there are no items on the agenda today that will fall under that. Item 3 is the declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest on any of the items in today's agenda? I will take silence as a no. Thank you very much. Item 4 is the minutes of the last meeting, which was dated the 21st of January 2025. Agenda item 4. So I shall call out the page numbers as per today's agenda, and if you have any queries or comments, please signal. So page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, and page 16, and the minutes as a whole. You are happy to approve those? Thank you very much. Item 5 is public questions and petitions. We have one agenda-related item. This is from Caroline Dewar, who is the chair of the Friends of Graves Park, and I believe you wish to come up and ask your questions and make statements. Please come up. Good afternoon, Caroline. It's good to see you as always. Please state your questions and statements when you're ready.
These relate to item 9, progress report, alternatives to the use of Norton Nurseries, Graves Park as an operational base for parks and countryside services. Re-point 116, the use of the word several is incorrect or misleading, as several is less than 5 and the actual number is 35 plus. And why does Graves Park need 20 ride-on mowers? Re-item point 222, does the refuse tip have a licence to process waste? If so, when was this licence first approved? If not, this activity should be stopped with immediate effect. Re-point 223, the largest vehicles are not stored on the proposed extension to the Arboretum required by Friends of Graves Park. Which vehicles need this large turning space and what are they used for in Graves Park? And re-point 228, the Friends of Graves Park do not have any objection to part of the Norton Nurseries site being used for maintenance of Graves Park. This is within the objectives of the Graves Park charity. Therefore, we do not see the need for the Trust to be committed to payments to third parties for the use of their land. And also, please note our comments from the last meeting, which have been ignored by the latest report. Item 10, Norton Nurseries. The Parks Department do not need to find a new depot before they release the next section of the site for the Arboretum Restoration Project. The bit Friends of Grace Park want is virtually unused, so they could move the few pieces of stuff they have on there to elsewhere on the site and let us get started while they continue to run their depot until such time as they find a replacement site. We have looked at the site together and anyone can see how bare it is of use and activity. We just want that one part of the site released, not several or other parts, so this decision would stand for some years. The Friends feel that SCC Parks are looking for any excuses to hang on to the land and not release it for restoration.
Thank you very much. In terms of your statements, I'm sure that few of these points will be covered off in point 9 in the report. In terms of your questions, specifically, why does Grace Park need 20 ride-on mowers? The information I've been given is that the park uses 2 different types of ride-on mowers and several pedestrian mowers, plus 2 compact tractors, one for fell work to cut hedges, and the other with fork bucket to move items around the farm. Plus, additionally, 2 tractors, one at the farm for moving items and transporting hay and straw, one for cutting grass. Other ride mowers are also currently kept on site that work in surrounding areas, the green space in the south of the city. So my understanding is that specifically for Groves Park, it doesn't need 20 ride-on mowers, but it's part of the process that we are investigating and moving towards rationalising and sorting out as part of the item 9, alternative operational arrangements. My understanding is that the largest vehicles are not stored at proposed extensions required by Friends of Grace Park. At the moment, this is something we are investigating as part of item 9. There are some, again, as I understand it, there will be some operational difficulties if those particular pieces of equipment are not stored where they are at the moment. They have very large turning circles. I was up there last week myself, and yes, they look to be a piece of equipment in a large open area, but actually if you try to turn them, and I had this discussion, it would be problematic. But again, all of these points will come through as we work through the alternative proposals. I just would like to say, again, and as I said in the last meeting in January, I do not feel I've seen any evidence that the officers and the council are not going to sort this out. I see this as a programme that will come to its conclusion when all the evidence collections and all the alternatives have been considered, and will be working in the best interests of the charity to provide the best solution that is also workable within the council as well. Thank you. Item 6 is members' questions, and we've received none today. Thank you. Item 7 is the work programme. Presenting officer is Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Rachel Appleyard, Principal Democratic Services Officer. So the work programme aims to set out all the known substantive items for this meeting and for forthcoming meetings as well. It's detailed in the agenda pack starting on page 23. There's a couple of items to just make members aware of that have been added since the agenda was published. One of these relates to Endcliffe Park Café and a marketing exercise. This will be brought to the June committee along with another additional item, Grace Park, the Animal Farm Coffee Concession, which will need retendering. So there are 2 additional items for the June meeting. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Do we have any questions regarding the additions to the work programme or the work programme as it currently stands? No, did you want to make any comments? Okay, thank you. That then is noted. Item 8 is a progress update on the Rose Garden Café, and we have some speakers to come up. This is Rebecca Nixon with Chris Hill and Julie Collins. If you'd like to come forward, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for coming in today. Last week, I believe the week last Monday, I had the pleasure of attending a presentation in situ at the Rose Garden Café to get a briefing on the progress that the partnership has made, and it is a lot of good progress. I won't steal anybody's thunder, and we did say that this would come to the subcommittee for this update. I'll hand over to you, but please could you introduce yourselves as and when you speak. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name's Rebecca Nixon and I'm a project manager in the Capital Delivery Service and a Sheffield City Council representative on the Rose Garden Café partnership.
I'm Julie Collins. I'm the current tenant of
I'm Christopher Hill, the architect appointed on the project.
Okay, so since we last met with you all, the key item that we were looking to do was the initial design work, so the REBA stage 1 and 2 design work. And I just wanted to reread the key priorities that came out of the public consultation, because that was the brief that was given to the design team in order to create the restoration and refurbishment proposals. So the key priorities that came out of the public consultation was community use, so to widen community use for a wide range of groups, including the flexibility to perhaps hire the space, but also to ensure that we keep that opportunity to have a dedicated play space for children, as well as the opportunity to be dog friendly. Preservation of the cafe's heritage and history was really key, and to ensure that the restoration is sensitive, and in particular reinstating original features such as the clock tower and preserving the really iconic front facade, which we're all really familiar with. Internal modernisation and refurbishment, including the kitchen, the back of house areas, and making sure that the building is really fit for purpose. As we know, the building stood for nearly 100 years and it needs modernising to meet modern needs, really. Increased connection between the inside and outside, so can we actually see out of the windows? That would be helpful. Greater daylight and connection through to the park, and to ensure that the building is sustainable, which talks about its operational costs, as well as just improving air tightness, and passive strategies where possible, and also to ensure the building's security, so to make sure that it's not going to be vulnerable to vandalism, and again to kind of reduce future maintenance costs. So that was the brief, and those priorities came out of that public consultation that we held. And now Chris is going to take you through the design proposals that he's come up with alongside the other design professionals.
Thanks, Becky. We've got some slides on the screen behind you over here with the plans and elevations that we've prepared so far. As Becky's mentioned, we had quite a detailed brief for the project. From the outset, the general strategy for this has been to retain and restore the building, leaving it in much the same way that it currently is. There's a few areas where we're reinstating original features, and there's some things that are new, again with the idea to modernise the building and not just comply with current building regulations, but to improve the space and provide new facilities and new sort of features that not just make it more usable for current park users, but hopefully attract new park users. So the layouts that we've prepared so far include a greatly extended external seating area, and rationalisation of the footpaths around the building so that we've got level access on multiple different sides. The external seating area also has a generous covered external seating area as well. The design of that external covered seating area is to match and marry through with the existing appearance of the building and give it some balance against the more recent toilet block extension. I wonder if we could go through some of the slides so we could look at the plans in more detail. Thank you. So the internal layout includes some changes which we hope make the kitchen area and back of house parts of the building function a little better. We have managed to include a new separate seating area to the back of the building, which can serve as a play space or a hire room. And we've also been able to include a changing places toilet. So on top of the existing generous toilet provisions, there's extra flexibility and provision there for anyone who comes to use the park. Could we go through to some elevations as well? So this drawing roughly shows how the front elevation of the building appears. Generally, it should look quite familiar. The two noticeable changes here are reinstatement of the patio doors on the left and right hand side of the central portion of the building, which is returning the building to its sort of original appearance. On this front elevation, we've retained the small dormer windows on the main roof as well. To the right hand side, you can see the existing toilet block extension, which was constructed more recently. And we've identified that as an excellent area to put some photovoltaic solar panels on the building, reduce its operational carbon footprint. On the left-hand side is where we can see the small external covered seating area, which is a timber-framed construction which should match through with the mock Tudor framing on the front of the building with a pitched roof in tiled finish to match the appearance of the original roof as well. I think there's a few more elevation pictures there for people to see. And here again there's the clock tower, which would be refurbished, redecorated as part of the proposals. And to the rear of the building, where we've included new windows and doors, provide access and natural light to the playroom and hire space on the rear of the building.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions, but I'll take them at the end. Do any of the committee members have any questions for our panel? Fran.
Thank you. And again, just to echo Richard's words there, I really enjoyed the presentation you did up when you did the public meeting. It was a fantastic session. And I'm going to ask some of the same questions that were asked there, just because I think it's worth the wider public hearing those questions as well. So it's not because I've forgotten your answers when you raised them there, but I think it's worth discussing. First of all, I just think, you know, especially the use of the outside space and the extension of the seating areas and stuff looks really fantastic. And it's great to develop that internal community room space as well. So could you perhaps say a little bit about how you think that will be managed going forwards in terms of the future governance of the building? Is that something you see the cafe operator managing the whole building and managing the use of that community space? And you know, I know the hope here is that this does become a widely used space, more than just a cafe, if you like, though it's a very good cafe. But, you know, so is that something you see as, in terms of the future governance and management of the project, assuming that we're able to raise all the funding to achieve this? And I do think it would be worth you saying something as well about the funding side of things. I know we have discussed it here before, but we know there's a big ask here. And I know we discussed at the public meeting about going to the Heritage Lottery Fund around this. And obviously, from the perspective of the council, we've put quite a lot of match funding into it in terms of the work that's gone in so far. So I think that's a helpful ask. And again, just say a big thank you to everybody who's been involved, especially those of you who are volunteering your time over this. And I know, Chris, you've done a lot of the work pro bono, and it's hugely appreciated. So just a couple of questions from me there to begin with, at least.
Thank you, Fran, for your questions. I think in terms of community use and the kind of operation of the cafe once the restoration is complete, we have designed for flexibility. I think that's the key thing. So we've looked at things, for example, such as the troubles with the queuing system that exists at the moment. So the queue cuts the building or cuts the seating area right in two, and that's a real challenge, which is why Chris and the team have looked at moving where that servery works, as well as an original external hatch, which will help with operation. We've now got more doors with those reinstatement of the original 1927 patio doors, and then that new higher space at the back. So whichever operator does take on this building, there's a huge amount of flexibility within what the building can offer, both as a cafe but also a community facility, and also, of course, with all the modernised kitchen provision, and also just the thermal comfort of the building. And yeah, so I think that is really improved. I don't know if you want to add anything on that, Julie.
No, I think nothing but probably that. I think it would need to be organised by the operator, the community room. I mean, we get people now that phone up and say, can we hire this space out? Or, you know, so there is a lot of potential business there for it. I think it's great that we can pick and choose when those times are with this, because it will have a sliding partition. Because as you know, at the moment, there aren't enough seats. There isn't enough space for the amount of people that are coming through that door. So it needs to be flexible, that it can be managed, that yes, we can take this booking at this particular time, but on other busier times, it needs to be open for everybody as well. So yeah. In terms of fundraising and getting all the money together, I'm just here to kind of speak a little bit on what the community are doing to actually just get some of those pounds and shillings together. As a community group, we know that we can't raise 2.5 million, but what we are doing is we come together every month and we decide on really some kind of volunteerings on how we can get some money together, and they're just little things to bring the community together. So at the moment, on the 12th of April, we have got some Easter themed activities going on actually inside the cafe and outside, weather preventing. We're going to do some face painting, we're going to have some Easter bonnet parade outside, some eggs have been donated by Morrison Supermarket. We're going to have a raffle. When we did one of these events prior, it raised £1,500. You know, people went round tables with buckets shaking around, and people, you know, were quite happy to put their extra pence in. On the 2nd of May, we are organising a Pie and Peas event, a quiz night. We're hoping to sell about 100 tickets, £15 a ticket, and Dukes are going to sponsor that. So every pound spent on the ticket will actually go towards the fund. And then there's other various activities on the 17th and 18th of May. David, who is Friends of Grays Park, is going to do some sponsored walks, which he's done some before, and they've been quite successful. There's also a scheme which you're probably aware of called Better Points, which at the moment people can use community transport, get around in a more environment-friendly way, and it earns them points on their app, which they can, at our other cafe, Dukes at Norfolk Park, they can come and get a free coffee for 1,000 points. We're actually working with the people at the moment that they're actually going to be able to use that at Rose Garden, but as well as getting a free coffee, 50p is going to be donated into the charitable fund as well, into the fund to get the money together. So also as well at the moment, for every coffee that is bought at Dukes, we donate 10p, and so far we've put £1,924 into that pot. So it's getting there to get, with everything else that everybody does, to get the balance together so that we can actually approach the funding. So that's what people are doing.
I thought it might be worth adding to what Julie said about the community rooms. One of the things that I would say is we will work out the best way of doing it and make sure that we make that clear in advance of tendering, working with the likes of Julie and to be fair, our other operators across the city, because Julie's right, it does need to be flexible. It needs to work for whomever is operating that cafe. But equally, there might be demands beyond the cafe. So you can imagine Julie would be happy to manage a booking system that worked for her business and also allowed bookings between the hours of 9 and 5, but she may not want to be there at 7 o'clock on a Thursday. So actually there might be some reversion to the park service. So it'll be what is the need, what is the best way of doing it, and then making it really clear to anybody that's interested in that business so that there's no surprises. Because I don't think anybody would be happy if we suddenly said, oh, by the way, you didn't know about this, but every Thursday we need you there till 9 o'clock. So we'll work out what is needed and then the best way of doing it.
Can I just add one more thing? Sorry, thank you. Just on funding, so I think at the moment the Reba Stage 2 design is the full wish list of what we would like to include, which is costed at 2.6 million, or just about 2.6 million. That also includes things like, for example, lighting from the animal farm to the cafe, so that we could perhaps use the building in the evening for community use as well. So it really is like the full wish list. What we're now looking at, as well as we've submitted an expression of interest to the National Heritage Lottery Fund for the full amount, which may be likely to be successful. It might not, we don't know. But we thought we might as well ask for the full amount. One thing that they will ask for is a match funding element of at least 10%, which would be 260,000. At the moment, we believe it would need their verification that we've got 230,000 in match funding, which is money already spent, also inclusive of the fundraising. So that's the 17,000 from the community fundraising, that's the 25,000 that was kindly donated by the local area committees, and then the remainder's been put in by the council through various funds. The other things that we're really looking to do is how can we reduce those costs. So we've held an expression of interest with contractors, and the partnership have been really good in saying, well, you know, what if we have someone who could restore the clock tower pro bono, for example? How would that work with the contractors? What if we had free materials donated? So it's about us working with contractors to understand how we can get those things in early to reduce the overall costs. The other thing that we're looking at doing is soft market testing. So say, for example, an operator might not want the whole space completely refurbished. Perhaps they'd like to put their stamp on it, and therefore we wouldn't do the full internal refurbishment, like all the painting and decorating, because they might like to do some of that. So what we're trying to do now, whilst we wait for the National Heritage Lottery Fund response, is try and understand how we can reduce our costs. Also, things, for example, changing places, toilets, there's funds available for that. So that's what we're starting to do now as a partnership, and also look at life cycle costing as well. So to understand the costs for the future maintenance, which of course will be integral for the sustainability of the building moving forward once we've done the restoration. So those are the kind of next steps that we're looking at. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
I'd just comment that having attended the meeting in the evening after dark, I think the lighted path bit is an essential rather than a nice to have. But it sounds really fantastic. Thanks for all the work going in.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. I mean, my comments are, it's moving at a great pace and to a great place. I think the changing places toilet is a real plus. I mean, I was involved, I think I opened the one at Western Park, and it's a game changer for people. It just makes the whole park and the Rose Garden Café accessible to people who need that type of facility. In terms of the solar panelling, I forgot to ask this question last time. I note on your plan that you've got a double layer on one side of the building, but only a single layer on the other. Is that? I'm sure there's a very good reason for that. I'm just intrigued by it.
Yes, that's just as far as, it's just how many we think we can fit based on the size of a standard panel and the size of the roof on that side of the building. So it's slightly offset to avoid any overshadowing from the main roof. We might be able to choose a slightly different panel size depending on what's economical, but yes, so far with the design based on sort of a standard sort of 400 watt array, we've positioned them to try and be as symmetrical as we can.
Thank you, thank you. Which leads me on to my second question, which is, how do you make a 100-year-old building eco-friendly? Can it be done? I'm sure it's a consideration you've had.
I mean, being a historic building, there's going to be limitations to how thermally efficient it can be, but we're certainly going to try and make it as close, or if not better than current regulations as possible. There's kind of two different dimensions to this. It's firstly insulating the building, and there's restrictions about the best way to do that, and there's different ways of looking at that. The general strategy what we're proposing is to do that on the inside face of the building rather than the external face of the building, so we can preserve the external appearance of the building. But the sort of specification of that insulation has to be considered so that it's not detrimental to the fabric of the existing structure. The second dimension is the sort of building services, the mechanical, the electrical, the plumbing services that we put in the building. So the building's in need of a full refurbishment of all of the electrical and mechanical services as it is. So a full rewire, new fans, lighting throughout, everything else. And as part of that mechanical and electrical refurbishment, this is where the solar panels on the roof come into play, whether we can get some battery electrical storage somewhere in the building. And then in terms of heating and cooling the building, installing air source heat pumps and internal connected to internal fans, so that as far as practical, the building is operating using on-site generated electricity and has a very low operational cost.
Right, thank you. And finally, without wishing to hold you to anything, with the following wind, what type of timescales are we talking about to actually achieve your final ambition?
This is always a tricky question in committee that always gets asked. It will depend on funding, and it will depend on the scope of works that the funding allows. One thing that I didn't mention was how we have asked the quantity surveyor, so the cost manager, to really look at the elements of the works. So if we were able to get X amount of funding, what works would we do first and why? And obviously you have to think about disruption to the operator, you have to think about value of money in terms of parcelling up these portions of works. But our aspiration is to keep moving as quick as possible, and the next key would be to complete the detailed design work. We can't appoint a contractor to do any building work until we've done that next detailed design work, so that's REBA stage 3 onwards. And yeah, if the EOI to the National Heritage Lottery Fund is successful, they will give a response within 3 months, so we submitted that last week. Then we'll be able to apply for development funding, which will pay for those design team fees for the next stage. Construction works for the full thing might take a year. So yeah, not sure. We have a programme, but we won't know until we've got the funding in place. But we are moving as quickly as we can and trying to do parallel bits of work so we don't have something that stops us.
Okay, thank you for that. I think in summary, it's we're a long way from where we were 2 years ago, and it's I think for those of you who are on this committee 2 years ago, I didn't necessarily envisage we get to this great positive point, and I think it's down primarily to the partnership that's worked well. Just for the record, you are 3 individuals who work with the partnership. Becky runs the partnership, but who else, just for clarification, sits on the partnership? You've got Chris Hallam, who's the chair, but which other partners aren't here today?
You have got Caroline that sits on the partnership, Andy Kershaw, you've got Catherine who's Grace Park manager, David sits on the partnership as well, and I think that's about it, isn't it?
Yes, we have Sheffield City Council representatives,
Friends of Grace Park, and Save the Rose Garden Café campaign, so that's them all listed individually.
Thank you for that. I mean, thank you for the work you do. We have some, if there's no other questions or comments, We have some recommendations which I shall read through. We are recommended to note the progress made towards the actions agreed in the October 2023 report, agree to receive a further report on progress towards the establishing of funding sources as agreed in the October 23 report, note that further updates and decisions will be taken to the appropriate committee as required, and support the partnership to continue to establish funds for the full restoration and refurbishment for the Stage 2 cost plan estimate of £2.6 million. Are we happy to agree that recommendation? That looks unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming in. Okay. Item 9 is our final item this afternoon. This is a update on alternative operational arrangements for Norton Nursery, and I assume you're presenting today, Ruth?
I am, thank you. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself earlier. I'm Ruth Bell, I'm Head of Parks and Countryside. So, as in previous meetings, I'm not proposing to read the report line by line. I'm sure that everybody's had a chance to read the report through. This latest report is similar to the previous report. It provides a further update on progress towards identifying options for us to bring and present to the Charity Trustee Subcommittee as potential alternatives to the operational base that currently operates out of Norton Nurseries. Just to recap on the work that we're doing, because it was expanded at the last committee, I'm sure that you all remember. So the options that we're looking for include finding a new site for the entire operational base. That is basically picking up the operations that are currently in Norton Nurseries and moving them wholesale somewhere else. Picking up those operations from Norton Nurseries and splitting it up into smaller operations that are located in multiple sites across the geographical area. And then the two things that we talked about further at the last committee meeting, the first one, finding a ideally long-term temporary alternative site that, whilst it is not feasible to have it as a permanent future base for Norton Nurseries, it's somewhere that might be appropriate for a fixed term use in advance of that site being used for something else. So I'm sure that you all saw that it was reported in, I think, the Yorkshire Post, that we've mentioned in this report that the Norton Aerodrome might be an appropriate short-term alternative site to the Norton Nurseries base. So Norton Aerodrome is allocated as a housing site and hopefully will be developed at some point as housing, but that's unlikely to happen within the next 12, 18, 24 months. So in order to allow this committee to make a decision as soon as it possibly can on what the best alternatives are, it might be that we look at that site as a short-term alternative to allow us to present you with options. And also, as a little bit of an aside, because it's not all of the work, we've been looking at alternatives for the largest vehicles and machinery that operate out of Norton Nurseries while still retaining a presence at Norton Nurseries. So this is the much discussed, what is the area that looks like it's empty used for? So it's the turning circles for those largest vehicles that we have in Norton Nurseries. Is there something that we can do, hopefully relatively quickly, to get those out whilst we continue to look at alternatives for either the rest of Norton Nurseries or sections of the operations out of Norton Nurseries? And that is the element of the site that the Friends of Graves Park have indicated is most important to them in us looking at alternatives. Excuse me. Unfortunately, as per the last committee and the committee before that, whilst we've done work and identified a number of sites that felt great for us, they haven't been possible for a variety of reasons. We continue to look at those sites, Norton Aerodrome and things like that, where we said no because they're going to be used for X. We're looking at those for short term, and also we continue to look at whether or not any appropriate sites come on the market that we might lease or hire as an alternative to Norton Nurseries. There haven't been any since the last committee date. That's all subject to the market, and it's literally just what comes up when. So we'll continue to look at that. It does feel like we're making progress on the potential to move the largest vehicles from Norton Nurseries. The most positive conversations that we've had have been around Olive Grove, which is the depot that AME use relatively close to Norton Nurseries. We believe that there is a section of the site that might be feasible to be used for those largest vehicles, where we might be able to operate them safely, both for the people using those vehicles and also for the people that use the rest of the site as well. So we continue to talk to Amy about what that might look like. The only slight stumbling block is that they're currently having some construction works, and I think the places that they've got all of their containers to do those works is the place that would be great for those vehicles. So we just need to know what those timescales would mean. Does it mean a long wait? Do we need to find something else in the interim to allow us to do it? But I'm very hopeful. I'm touching some wood while I'm saying this. I'm really hopeful that as a minimum at the next meeting, which I believe is likely to be towards the end of June, that as a minimum, I'm hoping to be able to bring a proposal for those largest vehicles to be moved out of Norton Nurseries. As a minimum, ideally I would be bringing options for everything else as well, but that feels a little bit, well, it's much bigger and much harder, and we don't have a very clear alternative for that at the moment. But yeah, so I'm hoping that you'll see some progress and an actual decision at the next meeting, at least about part of the site. So it feels like progress has been made. I was going to say it feels like it's been relatively slow, but actually we've had a series of meetings that have been sort of 6 weeks apart, so it's actually been fairly quick, albeit as not having an answer on the table right now. So yeah, the report asks that committee note the contents of the report, note that we have made progress, and it feels like we've got some options heading towards being on the table, and also continue to support the work that's ongoing to identify options to allow us to offer you options to decide how Norton Nurseries will be operated in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Any member questions? Fran.
Thank you. Thanks, Ruth, again for all the work going in, and obviously it reflects back on the questions that were asked at the start as well. So a couple of questions really. I think first of all, I think it's quite clear from conversation with the friends and so on that the priority is about the vehicles and so on. The AME, the Olive Grove solution sounds promising, really promising. And I suppose one of my questions is if, and perhaps it's not to be finally agreed here, but if that does become available as an option, if we leave it there effectively, and if that's a decision we choose to take, because I'm conscious that officers are putting a lot of work in looking at sites for temporary sites and things like that we may not need to do, and obviously I think that's a conversation we'd have with the friends as well, so, and with the agreement of the committee, whether that's something we could look at doing. And then I think the other conversations we've had when looking at that is, even if those vehicles are able to vacate the site, we've just got to be clear there's still some work to be done on the site, isn't there, in terms of there's buildings there and things like that, of making that site safe if it becomes available for public use. And if this is the direction we're heading, can we at least start some planning work now for what that might look like, so that we don't get ourselves into a position where we get to June, perhaps take a decision and then go, yes, but now we need another 3 months to think about how we're going to make the site safe. I'm just thinking of other ways. It is a long process ultimately making these decisions by committee, and that's not at all because officers are not putting the work in. But are there ways that we can think ahead and plan ahead for, solutions that are hopefully going to come forward? Thanks.
Thank you. So I think I've noted those down, and I can take them in order. So yeah, I think we are all clear that the priority is the vehicles. I do appreciate that the Friends have indicated that's their priority, and the other stuff can take longer, and that I mean, it is inevitably going to take longer. It's a much bigger thing. Even just finding a site is absolutely massive. What we will do is bring options for the committee to make that decision, because it's not right that officers, we've talked about how we're in this situation. It's not right that officers, and the Friends would agree with this, I think. It's not right that officers say, we'll move the vehicles and then we won't do the rest of it. So we will bring options, and there will be work involved. And it may be that the decision is made to not leave the rest of the site or to reconfigure the site or something like that. But what we will do is present options that allow you to make a decision in the best interest of the charity, and then everybody will be clear what we are doing, why we're doing it, and then ideally how long we're doing it for as well. On the second point, yes, you're absolutely right. I think, so we indicated at the last meeting that the area that the Friends want to bring back to parkland is not in itself a problem. However, at the point that it's opened up to the public, certainly it feels like it exposes certainly a building which is very problematic. I don't think we will have necessarily a final answer on that for June, but what I think we will do is indicate what we think are the problems and why we think they're problems and what would need to be resolved, because actually the Friends will know how to operate in that area. I'm not worried about Caroline climbing on the roof of that building and causing a problem. It's at the point that it becomes open to the public that we need to make sure it's safe. So what we will do is indicate the problems and also say that perhaps we may come back here or just work with the Friends on what it looks like at the point we reach the next stage after the Friends have done a lot of their work. So I don't think that those things need to delay certainly the first decision. I think they can just be considerations in either future decisions or in the future things happening within that area, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Any other questions or queries? Curtis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Sorry. Yeah, it's all right. So I think it's worth mentioning that while we are sat in the town hall, the entirety of Graves Park does belong to the people of Sheffield, not the council. It is a charitable park, and the purpose of that, to my mind anyway, is that regardless of politics or any short-term pressures or any changes in local government, Graves Park sort of stands untouched, because it's about how the park is for the next 100 years, not necessarily the next 5 years, that I think is important. And so I think restoring as much of the parkland is really important, but it's as much about restoring trust as it is about restoring parkland, because I think for decades the Friends group have been, I'm trying not to use any rude words, but the Friends group haven't always been treated the best by Sheffield City Council, and we've seen with Rose Garden Café actually what good communication can really do to fix relations. And while some of these decisions might be uncomfortable in the short term for Sheffield City Council, restoring trust is far more important in the long term for the city. And as I say, we've seen this pay dividends with Rose Garden Café, so I'm really pleased actually to see that progress has been made. I was a little bit of a cynic when we got the report a few months ago, but it does look like progress is being made. And if my reading is correct, and please do correct me, it looks like the short-term possibility of Norton Aerodrome, but like it is in the short term because it's in that local planner's housing. And there is a longer term view of the Amy site, but that's only for the vehicles, did you say? So there will have to be something else after that as well. So while progress is being made, and hopefully more progress in the coming months, this is just a stop along the way, isn't it? We still need to carry on looking at this and make sure that it doesn't fall off our radar just because the immediate pressure dissipates in the next few months. We still need to restore as much of this land to parkland as possible, really.
So I'm happy to respond a little bit on that. What we will do is present the options that are available, and it will be for the committee to decide what is the best thing for the Graves Park charity, what is the best solution to the operational requirements of both the Graves Park itself and also local parks, ensuring that if that includes any use of Norton Nurseries or Graves Park, that the charity benefits in the most appropriate way. So we'll present options, and it will be for the committee to decide what is in the best interest of the charity.
Thank you, Curtis. Yeah, any other questions, comments? No, that's fine. Well, your report is noted, thank you. We have some recommendations. What I would say, and just to reinforce the point you did make, is that moving the bigger vehicles out isn't the end game. It's a trying to address a key issue of Friends of Graves Park in the most effective way possible, whilst not losing sight of the long-term ambition of resolving this whole issue for the benefit, as you say, of the charity, for the management of the park, and for the greener spaces throughout the city. Okay, on that basis, the recommendations are that we note the contents of this report, that we note the progress that has been made by officers in securing a new operating base as an alternative to using Norton Nurseries in Graves Park. And finally, point 3, recommendation 3, support the continued work to identify further options which will be brought back to this committee for consideration and approval. Is that agreed? That looks unanimous to me. That actually concludes our agenda today. This is actually the final meeting, scheduled meeting for this cycle. As chair, I'd just like to thank you for all your inputs. I'd like to thank the officers. You've done an awful lot of work in trying to address some of these issues. It was never going to be a quick and easy, but as Councillor Crossan has said, I think progress is being made, and I'm very optimistic that next cycle we will be seeing things moving forward even further. So thank you for your time today. Thank you.